to the Killer Content podcast, the weekly rundown for true crime junkies. From the biggest crime stories making headlines to the latest must-watch documentaries and chilling murder mysteries, we've got you covered each week. Welcome to the Killer Content podcast. I've got Anne here, who is a total true crime junkie, and myself, I run the Killer Content TikTok page. Today in the episode, we're going to talk about the Erin Patterson sentencing, Charlie Kirk killing in America, the Tom Phillips shooting in New Zealand and the finding of their 3 children. Also, New Zealand's been punching above its weight this week in crime. They've got a murder trial going on at the moment known as the Suitcase Murders. Then we're going to segue off into talking about some true crime docos, which Love, Con, Revenge, which is on Netflix. Then we've got Task, the new drama that's on HBO Max. And lastly, I Fought the Law, a dramatisation which is being shown on Stan. It's fair to say the Erin Patterson case was the biggest story in Australia this week. Mm-hmm. She was sentenced on Monday. It was televised live. I don't know what the ratings were, but I'm sure they were high. It was the case that gripped the nation. And the judge determined that she would get life with 33 years non-parole period. A few factors that he took in consideration. He said that the murders were cold and calculating. He also mentioned that she could have potentially saved these people's lives if she had told the medical staff that there had been forage mushrooms at the time that she said that she realised that they may have been put in the beef Wellington. And then on the other side of the mitigating factor was what life is like in prison with her, which is pretty stark. She's basically in solitary confinement, 22 hours a day in her cell, doesn't interact with anyone. And this is apparently due to her notoriety, and they think there's sort of a safety issue for her. And that's not going to change anytime soon. Now, people that were commenting on my TikTok on this story, very mixed, and one person quite rightly said, well, that's 11 years each for each murder. So what do you think of the sentencing?
Yeah, look, I was quite keen on her getting life without parole, I think, but except for the purposes of podcasters like us seeing her out in 30-something years. But I think it's fair. She will be in her 80s when the non-parole period is up, and the victim, the one living victim, will have been long gone, I imagine, by then. Hopefully her family will have moved on, and she will not be a risk to people at that stage. So I suppose it's done what it's supposed to do. It's taken her off out of the community where she's a risk and put her somewhere where she's not a risk. So
yeah, it was a punishment. He didn't. The judge said that he wouldn't. He wasn't taking chances of rehabilitation into account. Now, the other thing, Ian Wilkinson turned up to the court, but Simon Patterson, her estranged husband, didn't.
Yes. Well, Simon was busy at home doing his own podcast. How exciting. So if you think there's been too much on Erin Patterson, no. And I think it'll be fascinating hearing from her husband as to all the circumstances around their family, around how did it get to this point where she felt she needed to murder the family. Will be fascinating. So yeah, that's big news this week in the podcast world. He'll be running his own podcast. And Ian Wilkinson got up at the end of the case. I'll just comment on that. And he spoke to the journalists, and he was, as he has been, incredibly calm and considered and thoughtful. And I think he has an enormous amount of interesting advice to give people. He was speaking about just being kind to people, and I think he was boiling it down that Erin was unkind. Well, she was very unkind indeed. Emma, the worst kind of unkind.
She's definitely. But the other thing is, I know you've got a media background, and I might try and get a photo and put it up here, but have you seen a bigger media throng in the last 20 years? Did you see those photos?
Oh, extraordinary. It's like something you see out of an American TV. I didn't even know we had that many journalists in Australia.
No, that's what I thought.
You see those in the US where there are thousands of journalists and lots of different outlets, but here it was extraordinary. And I watched the coverage, and then I basically watched the ABC for a number of hours afterwards. They had multiple journos covering it. It was extraordinary. No, I haven't seen anything like it, I don't think. Maybe Lindy Chamberlain.
Yes, that's right. Maybe, but yeah, there was some magnificent shots of the media.
Yes.
The other thing, circling back to Simon Patterson and his podcast, I actually think he's been incredibly smart. I know there's been offers on the table for him to do a tell-all interview, and I think there's been quite significant money attached to that, but he obviously wants to control the narrative to his own story, and also too, I hope he makes a bit of money out of it, because obviously people are wanting to make money out of them. The one thing I want to say about Simon, and my views about him have changed a bit. I think he has handled this trial with a lot of dignity, and obviously with the care of the kids at foremost in his mind. I did have some negative views about him in regard to the child support issue. Apparently he was only paying her $30 a month, and we do know that she'd been extremely generous to his family, plus also he was getting the repayments of one of those loans, and I was thinking, come on, that's kind of be a bit fairer. But the other issue is, and the judge raised this, he was showing the messages, and he said we don't know what the motive was, but he definitely raised that there was this friction between them about the child support. So I'm going to do a mic drop moment here. Do you think if he'd been paying fairer child support that this whole thing couldn't have happened?
Oh gosh.
Would his parents still be alive?
Oh, well, that is victim blaming at its worst, Emma Ashton.
I know.
If their son had paid... Is this because we're a couple of divorcees that this is the way we think about these things? Look, of course, there has to be a reason why she did it. And as you said, that's never really come to the fore. Being pissed off with him may well be the reason. Is it a good excuse? No.
Well, I always thought that argument by the prosecution was absolutely weak about the child support. I mean, I thought he looked like a bit of a douche because of it, but I thought if people were knocking off their ex-husbands over child support, there'd be a lot of dead bodies, or the in-laws. So I actually don't believe that was the reason she killed them. I think that there was some deep-seated long-term resentment. Anyway, I'm not blaming Simon at all for the death of his parents, but I just did want to put it out there.
I think, ex-husbands of Sydney are safe.
So next up, probably the international story of the week is the killing of right-wing podcaster, influencer Charlie Kirk. That occurred in Utah. I think it was on Wednesday this week. He was shot by a gunman who's now been... They've now found the accused. It took 33 hours or 36 hours, and it's Tyler Robinson is the person that's now in jail and will be charged with his murder. Now, I had never heard of him before that day. What about you, Anne?
Charlie Kirk?
Yeah, Charlie Kirk.
I hadn't realised I had. So as someone who scrolls constantly, when it actually focused in on him, he has popped up a number of times in my feed, and I've seen snippets of him having an argument with someone, a bit like he was doing the day he was shot. But the name didn't click with me, no. But both my teenage children, who unfortunately saw rather horrific video first thing in the morning, knew him very well. They don't agree with him, but they were very aware of him. So maybe I'm the wrong demographic, or maybe we're the wrong demographic.
And he's very polarising. I mean, it reminded that his death, in a sense, when I first saw it, gave me a Day of a Jackal vibe, because it was what I thought was a professional shooting, but the guy that they've got is apparently just a hunter. But the other thing, it reminded me a little bit of Luigi Mangione, because the people in the comments were... all over the interwebs, there were people that were absolutely distraught about it, and then there was other people that were basically celebrating it.
Yes, it's very... I mean, I've obviously seen some very sensible commentators come on and talk very sensibly about it. All the leaders, Biden, Obama, and Kamala Harris, have all come out and said very sensible things about not taking conversations and arguments so seriously that people end up dying. But yeah, there's certainly a lot of people from the right who are just playing this out as he's a martyr, and that somehow gun deaths in America are unusual.
It seems to be a day-to-day occurrence, and I think the issue is guns rather than the politics. We have political discourse over here, and people, and I do believe that people should be able to say what they want.
Yes, of course.
I do. I mean, there was a part of me that I did think there was a bit of Schlangenfreud with him. I mean, he did say that there would be a number of gun deaths a year to ensure that the Second Amendment was kept.
I think from a crime perspective, and I think this is the thing that a lot of us are I mean, we've become so desensitized, or I think I almost have too. I mean, when Sandy Hook happened, I remember being absolutely devastated, the school shooting, for those that I'm sure most people have heard of it. And then as the years go on, now a school shooting pops up and you hear it. And I think this is an interesting question about crime in the US, gun crime, because essentially what this is just a gun crime.
Yeah.
It's been seen as a political assassination, but this guy's just with all due respect to podcasters.
Absolutely.
He's not a political person, and he got his body, sadly, was taken home in Air Force 2. The vice president walked him off the plane. There's an example, and I've lost the names in my head, of that congresswoman, I think it was, who was shot and killed relatively recently this year. And my understanding is Trump barely mentioned her.
But one of the things is how Tyler Robinson got caught wasn't because of the FBI investigation. It was his father who recognised him from the surveillance footage and basically, turned him in, or got him to turn himself in. Now, Anne, would you turn your own child in?
Oh, gosh. Look, my gut feeling says no. My gut feeling is I would want to do everything I could to protect. I have two teenagers. Well, one's just turned 20. I want to do everything I could to protect them. But that's a gut feeling. If I was faced with this circumstance, maybe I'd have to rethink that. I thought, get the passports and let's head overseas. I do happen to live right next to the airport. That might be quite an easy thing for me to do. But it's interesting. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about this fellow was, why didn't he grab his passport and get out of the country? I did a little bit of research, and in fact, it's a very good chance he doesn't have a passport. Only less than 50% of Americans do. So if he's not, maybe he had very few options.
Yeah, it's interesting. Definitely interesting, and I was trying to twist it in my head because I don't, like with Charlie Kirk, my views are, you have that game of where someone says, if you could invite 4 people dead or alive to a dinner party, who would you invite? Well, Charlie Kirk would definitely not be on my invitation list, right? So, and then I was trying to, so when they said, would I turn my child in on that one, I'm like, probably not. Then I twisted it. I thought, what about if my child killed a leader that I really admired?
Oh, yes.
Like, how do you grapple with that? Why I found it so interesting that the father turned him in is that the Utah governor has said they're going to go for the death penalty.
Yes, and I think it goes back to the point about gun crime. I mean, one of the things that's hard for us to imagine is my children grabbing a gun where they wouldn't be able to access a gun. We're so used to these young people over there being able to grab a gun and shoot someone. That's not the case here. And the first court hearing is going to be on Tuesday. I think we're going to see a whole lot more of this. By the way, his family were Trump voters. The guy himself, didn't vote last election, doesn't belong to a political party, and has no criminal history. Well, what was most certainly the story of the week on my TikTok was the shooting of Tom Phillips, who's been a wanted man in New Zealand for nearly 4 years. And they've found his 3 children and they're all safe. But there's been a lot of chatter about it. Now, what happened? The circumstances were him and I think his eldest daughter were reported to be breaking into what they call a rural supply store. A police officer arrived and they sort of got away, and then he put down some spikes on the road and they ran over it. And then that's when Tom Phillips shot at him and hit. And then other backup arrived, and the backup managed to basically fatally shot Tom. And the eldest daughter, who's 12, is safe. She's then assisted police to tell them where the other 2 kids are at a remote camp, which I think took them about 10 or 12 hours. They found them. They're all safe. They're with, I can't pronounce it, but they're with the equivalent of New Zealand DOCS or family services, what we call here. So now, one of the things that I couldn't unravel, because this guy's only basically came under my radar on Monday, is
why did he take off? Why was he living with his 3 children in remote bushland in New Zealand?
It was very hard. I was trying to do a bit of research into it. The family court matter is all closed and you can get very little detail. It looks to me that he had custody of these children off and on, and maybe even, I mean, this is where I'm probably going out on a limb, but he may have even had custody around the time he took them, because I think he might have been about to lose custody of them, which may have triggered it. But it's very hard to get the details. But clearly there were issues between the parents and where these children were best placed. But fascinating. I mean, he committed a number of crimes while on the run to ensure that they had food and money, and people saw him. And I think I saw that his ex-wife even caught a glimpse of him somewhere when he was committing a crime. So he wasn't far from where he was from, I don't think.
There has been chat that there could have been some people helping him or keeping him hidden. So, it's an interesting one, and obviously there's a lot of emotion around it. I've noticed some comments on my TikTok, a lot of emotion, and some people thinking he's a hero, and other people, saying, he's scum. So quite polarizing. Now, one of the interesting aspects of it, there's the family, and that is his family, Tom Phillips' family, took out an injunction against the media to stop them reporting about certain parts of the investigation. There was an interim one, and there's been another one put in place, so nothing can be said for a week. Why would they take out an injunction?
I suspect it's to protect the children. I mean, now that he's been killed, there is the mother, obviously, but their lives are not, I suppose, they shouldn't probably be of interest to us now that they're found. If they're safe and they're in the care of the right department. I can only assume that's right, but there is scuttlebutt, and we won't be able to talk about that because of the injunction. But I suspect there is a lot more to this case that will come out, and if it does, we could come back and readdress it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think these kids have, been living in isolation for nearly 4 years in pretty, camp-like sort of conditions. Look, I have to say, Daily Mail has been doing some pretty lurid headlines about it. And also, I think the police commissioner or the police minister said this guy is no hero. So the other big case that's come out of New Zealand this week is called the Suitcase Murderers, and this is a very sort of fascinating case. It's Hakyung Lee, a mother of 2 children, has been charged with their murder. The 2 young children, I think they were 8 and 6, were found in suitcases that had been stored in a storage unit. And it was 4 years after their death that they were found. And what happened was Hakyung Lee had flown back to South Korea. Suitcases were in the storage unit. She ran out of money. The storage unit, the contents of the storage unit were sold off, and these people bought the suitcases and were opening up the suitcases and found these 2 dead bodies in it. She was obviously found in South Korea, brought back, charged with murder. What they're saying, there's no doubt she admits that she murdered him, but she said that she was insane at the time due to the death of her husband about less than a year previously. He had died very quickly of esophageal cancer, or even before the death of her husband, really, that she started unravelling.
Interesting. I think one of the things I read was that the children had the toxicology showed that they had been given something,
an antidepressant
or something, and I wonder whether that was just to quieten them down or calm them down. But we'll find out in the trial, I suppose. But yes,
interesting point. They don't know really. They got that, but they don't 100% know how they died. But what do you think about, how shocked would you be if you opened that suitcase?
Well, I am a big fan of Storage Wars and a number of other TV shows. It's not just true crime I enjoy storage documentaries, and I love it. They do these auctions in America. I haven't seen an Australian version of it. They do them in America where you bid on a sight unseen, or you've just peed inside and you buy the contents of this storage unit, and sometimes they find antiques, and they may find really good, valuable things, and then sometimes, like in this case, they find some pretty ordinary things. And I can only imagine if you're the sort of person that goes around buying storage units, that this would be dreadfully shocking, but also not what you're hoping for. But good on them for opening it up and bringing this woman to justice, I suppose. But yeah, fascinating stuff.
Well, as they said, if she kept on paying the storage fees, she'd still be, no one would have found out that she'd murdered her children. And it's interesting how many times suitcases are used to conceal a crime or a body.
Yes, well, a little bit of research shows it's very regular. I saw there was one in the UK only last year where a fellow murdered a couple of blokes and put them in suitcases. And he was spotted trying to carry the suitcases across the road by a bunch of guys who'd been drinking in a London pub, and one of them yelled out, "What have you got in there, a body?" Not knowing that in fact later he'd be called to give evidence because he saw them carrying the suitcases. Funny but awful at the same time. We should not laugh at these awful things, but yes, it seems to be a common way to dispose of bodies, which is just dreadful. But
well, you've got to transport them, I suppose. I mean, it's the macabre and the bizarre, but and some of it is bemusing rather than amusing.
Yes,
I
bemusing.
suppose.
Yes, and yes, absolutely.
How people do it. The trial continued next week, and I think it goes for a few more weeks. So we'll report back when the verdict comes down. Mm-hmm. So move on from crime. Yes. We'll talk about our next love is watching about true crime. So this week, one of the things we've watched is Love Con Revenge, which is on Netflix. And this is like a Tinder swindler-esque sort of case where these, and in fact, Cecile, who was on a victim of the Tinder swindler, is actually the host.
I like how you say Tindler. Clearly you're not on Tindler.
Tindler. I've got it. Yes, Tinder. Sorry. Tinder. And they investigate on behalf of these people, and it's mainly women, these trying to bring these men who have defrauded them to justice. Now, one of the things that before I press play, I always go, oh God, how do these women get sucked in like that? But then I kind of start watching and go, oh yeah, these guys are good.
Yeah, they're very good. I mean, some of the men in this show almost had me convinced. I mean, I actually thought that the choice of victim in this one was quite clever, because once the story started, you did lose that quite quickly, because they were they were clever men. Oh, I shouldn't say they were clever men. They're not clever men. They're just men. But the women who particularly the first one they focused on, the women who he targeted were all well-educated women, often had their own very successful careers, so had access to cash. And he was also in all social media, and if you did any research on them, and they all said they'd done research on him, he came across on LinkedIn and as a genuine businessman or business person. And I did feel quite sorry for them.
You can see how it happens. Like they start off, like with that guy, they start off small, lend me $1,000, then they give it back with a bit extra.
Yes.
So they get the trust, they love bomb. The one that you found really interesting was the case of the so-called doctor.
Yes, the one that, to your point about women, why do women fall for this? This woman was a very successful corporate ladder. She'd made a lot of money. She had raised 2 children on her own who were teenagers at this point, well-educated and well-versed in business, and came across a fellow, she was cautious too, I think, who claimed to be a medical doctor.
She also went to school with him.
That's right, she went to school. So she'd known this gentleman. He was part of her broader circle, hadn't seen him for a while. So, and they ended up marrying and starting a cosmetic surgery business. She still kept with her career. She was just an investor. And he hired other doctors to do cosmetic procedures in this clinic. She thought everything was fine. It started to, like all of them, it starts to unravel. But she married him, and he became the father to her daughters that she'd always hoped for. Ended up being a complete fraud. He was never a medical doctor. Claims to be a PhD. It's a bit hard to know whether he was or not.
Did she say she'd been defrauded out of $2 million? That she'd taken
$2 million
loans out?
Yes, I think she lost her house and she'd lost her career. And she's taken, so her story was tracking this fellow down. They basically have the team of the woman who was from the Tinder swindler and a PI. Very glamorous. These women are very glamorous. They drive around in beautiful cars. They seem to only be in sunshine. They're either in Florida or Los Angeles. And it's honestly, I want to become a PI and move to America. And they stake out these fellows. Their aim is to try and find enough evidence to allow these women to have their day in court, to take it to the police. Now, they have mixed success. This fellow, fascinating, he's tracked down because he is now a professor at a relatively at a university in a completely new career. He's a maths professor. And they often confront them. The bit that I find the most awkward watching this is where they confront them, or either they confront them, in this case the daughters confront. I do recommend it though.
I thought it was one of the things that made me gasp, and I've watched a lot of these dating con shows, was Cecile raised a really interesting point that I'd never heard of before. And the victim said it's like sleeping with the enemy. And Cecile, who's the host, said, she talked about the consent. She goes, it goes deep to the consent of the relationship. A lot of the talk about the consent when it comes to intimacy in this case, and we were talking about it beforehand, it's like you're sleeping with someone, you're having intimate relations with someone who is basically lied about who they are. And does that mean you're able to actually give consent, or is there consent? I mean, should there be laws around that? Because they must feel extremely violated.
Yes. Oh, in all these cases, the women expressed that as one of the deep feelings they had, which was they had consented to a relationship with someone who wasn't real. And so they felt they had been violated. And you're absolutely right. It was quite an interesting concept. It's something you've got to think about a bit. But in the marriage, I definitely felt that she had consented in that space, but as more broadly around her whole world, bringing her children up with him. I just found the whole thing was incredible. So yeah, it's a really interesting question, Emma. I don't know the answer to it, but worth contemplating.
Yeah, I'd recommend it a watch. I mean, I've got to be honest, I was watching while I was cooking dinner and stuff, so you didn't have to have 100% concentration on it. And another show that is absolutely beautifully filmed is a thriller or crime thriller, and it's fiction, called Task, and it's on HBO Max, and it's the same creator and writer from Mayor of Easttown. It's the first one that he's done since that amazing show. I was a huge fan of Mayor of Easttown. That's, I think, one of the shows that really got me into being addicted to streaming. And premise of the show, Mark Ruffalo, who's brilliant as always, is a sort of a dishevelled FBI who had to form a task force to try and catch these criminals who are ripping off drug dealers.
Yes. It's an interesting thing. So Mark Ruffalo's, there's a backstory we haven't really heard much about yet. It's clear that his own family has experienced some kind of crime, but that's still a bit of a mystery after episode 1. And the interesting thing, I think, is the setup for this story is that the criminals who are ripping off the drug dealers are garbos. Well, that's an Australian term, obviously, but garbage men, women, whatever. So they go around unseen. It's just such a standard thing to see a garbo outside your house. So the drug dealers in the first episode don't even suspect that they're being cased. It's crims ripping off crims. And the task force has only just been set up, so we're just getting to know the personalities. And
there's interesting, acting's good, characters are really interesting, and you were saying Martha Plimpton, a blast of our 80s kind
very
of
brief moment as a retiring police commissioner or senior police officer. Yes, gosh, I thought she might have been in it for the whole show, but no, just a one-off, unfortunately.
So yeah, so it's well, they're dropping an episode each week, I didn't even double screen while I was watching it. I was totally riveted. The first episode does go for 110 minutes, so it's almost movie length. But would you recommend it? Are you going to stick it out?
Oh, highly recommend it. I loved it. And if you haven't watched Mayor of Easttown, I'd go back and watch that. That's Kate Winslet, and it is dark and excellent as well. But no, I loved it. I can't wait. I can't believe it's dropping one a week. It feels like 1982.
Yeah, definitely, I think it'll be one of the shows of the year, and we'll definitely see it getting nominated at the Emmys next year.
Very good.
Now, last, and I haven't seen it all, so you're going to have to talk about this, but you've been raving about this to me all week. I Fought the Law, the serial dramatization of a case in England, and it's being shown on Stan.
Yes. A woman called Anne Ming sadly lost her daughter. Her daughter was murdered. And I won't give it all away because it is an interesting crime story in itself, but what they came up against as a family, and as I say, I probably won't give you all the detail because you can go and watch it, is they came up against the double jeopardy laws in the UK, where you can't be tried for the same crime twice. And this meant that when evidence emerged that showed that this particular individual had indeed murdered Anne Ming's daughter, he couldn't be tried again. Now, it's complicated as to why, and I do think it's worth watching it because you see the courtroom drama play. So you see the scenes leading up to the murder, and then you see the court. So it's a good mixture of true crime and the court process. And she takes the fight to have the double jeopardy rules all the way to the government. This is a woman who's barely left her area in the UK and is suddenly finding herself in London in the House of Lords. And she is still alive today, and there is a little bit of a cameo from her at one point, which I found incredibly moving. And she fought the law, as the title says, for years and years and years, while being very badly affected, and I again won't give you a spoiler, by the circumstances of her daughter's murder. Anyway, beautifully acted. I love a good UK series. They do it so well, and it's incredibly sad. But I understood from a little bit of Googling, and I should have done more research, that this change in the UK had an enormous effect on double jeopardy laws across the world.
I've only seen 2 episodes. It is set in the 80s, which is quite fascinating. So it's pre-internet and pre-mobile phone. So it's even more, her daughter kind of disappeared. And I felt so sorry for her just sitting beside that landline.
Oh, yes, the scenes with the landline, yes. Yeah. But you follow her into the 2000s, sorry, because it takes her so long to get justice, and so long. And you watch the personal story around, and this is the other part of it that's really interesting, is that, and it's often a theme in these things, is that the children that she had 2 other children, and those young adults as they were when the sister was murdered, played second fiddle, as did the husband, to Anne Ming's absolute desperation to see justice.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen the thing that's hit me so far, and we've seen in a lot of cases, was how the police dismissed her first phone call saying my daughter's missing, that they didn't really take it seriously. I'd say the police investigation was less than ideal at the start, so I'm hoping that it improves.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I missed that completely. You're glad you picked it up. One of the main themes is if the police had done their job properly, and I won't go into the details because it is quite key to the story, the fellow would have been convicted the first time. So it was incredibly poor policing. And they don't talk about it much, but as you can get from Anne Ming's last name, her husband was of Chinese descent. And there was a scene early on where people were quite racist to her and tried to get her to leave where they lived. They took a petition out to get the half Chinese family to move out. Highly recommended. It's beautifully done. It's very sad, but it's a very, and it's got a very interesting sort of lesson to learn about changing a law in the UK.
As always, Anne, a very interesting discussion with you. We love having a chat. We'll wrap up for the week, but if you've got any recommendations about TV shows that we should watch, please pop them in the comments.